So we hiked up there the next morning and shot a bull. And during that 8-hour time period, it snowed a foot. So all of a sudden there's 2 sophomores in high school with a dead elk on the ground 6.5 miles back. And one of them's wearing chacos and wool socks and wearing Carhartts. So that was one of the most brutal nights of my life.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Or joining me, I guess.
It's fun.
Yeah, a little pre-work morning podcast. So we've had you on quite a few of our videos. A lot of people know who you are, but I've been wanting to get you on here for several reasons. But what were you? Were you employee number 2?
I think technically, yeah, 2, or really depending on how you look at maybe Connor, like maybe 3 or something like that. I mean, at this point, I think I'm 1.
Yeah,
maybe, or Mike, but pretty close there.
Yeah, no, you were even ahead of Mike, because I mean, I had met Brandon, hadn't I, when you were?
Yeah, so when I actually reached out to you guys, I had DM'd the Instagram.
That's right.
And I had thought maybe that I was talking to you, which I think is the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, they see you on the Instagram a lot, and Brandon's face doesn't show up too much, but at that point, I mean, there was really not much on there. It was like you, Forge, and Jelly Roll Damascus.
Yeah.
And Brandon was actually the one that called me.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that would be right, because I met Brandon in the spring, kind of right after Winter Strong, and then it was like the last couple months of high school, that you had reached out.
Yep. Yeah, I had reached out on spring break, I think.
Yeah, and you're right. We had this rock climber kid that was helping me a little bit part-time. I mean, nobody back then was full-time.
Nope.
We'd had a rock climber kid that was helping us, cool kid. And I think Sadie was helping us a little bit.
Yep.
So
yeah, we were both kind of part-timey in there.
But at this point, you're the one that stuck, so you're number 1.
Yeah. It's funny.
So you were still in high school right? You were going to Hellgate?
I was, yeah. I was going to Hellgate High School. I think, yeah, I was in my senior year. I had found Montana Knife Company's Instagram page when I was in Costa Rica on like a surf trip on spring break. And at that point, you know, college is right around the corner, and I had myself set up pretty well to go do well there. And I was kind of thinking that that's what I was going to do, but I had planned on taking a gap year because I didn't know exactly what direction I wanted to go with that. And at that time, that was kind of peak COVID. So if I had gone straight to college right then, you know, I was looking at living in a dorm and doing classes remote, which sounded super shitty to me.
So I forgot about that.
Yeah. So at that point, and I think that was the case for I think a lot of kids in my year ended up doing more alternative things because they all realized that we were going to be either wearing masks or, you know, it was going to be like being in preschool, you know.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't going to be the typical
It was not going to be the college experience that we wanted. And then, you know.
When you found the Instagram, I mean, I don't think we could have had more than 1,000 or 2 followers. I mean.
It was really small. Early. It was small. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you say, you were pretty well set up. You got pretty good grades in high school, didn't you?
Yeah, I had like a 3.9 or a 3.89 or something. I don't know. I didn't have a 4.0, but I had pretty close. And I took a lot of, you know, AP and IB classes. Which is like the International Baccalaureate thing. It's basically just college classes in high school.
Yeah.
So I tried pretty hard. I mean, I wasn't like a complete nerd. I still had my fun and kind of fucked off a little bit, but I think I was just smart enough where I could kind of skate through and still get good grades in hard classes, but I certainly wasn't like 100% focused on preparing for college, that's for sure. But I definitely knew that was something at that time I wanted to do. So
yeah. So the outdoor stuff, the outdoor industry, or the outdoor, I'd say more the outdoor lifestyle started super young. I've heard the stories from your mom. I've heard the stories from your neighbors.
Right.
Growing up, what age do you remember being interested in stuff outside, whether it was fire or camping or hiking? hunting?
I mean, it was early for me because, I mean, I should actually find it. There's a picture of me and another little kid, and we're probably 5 or 6. And we're doing like a hand drill fire, like taking turns going down the spindle, like rubbing our hands down it. So I've been involved in that stuff since a super, super young age, and that was really, really lucky and really by chance.
Did you have a neighbor or somebody teaching you?
Well, so that was actually that photo was in Northern California on the Eel River with a lady named Tamara Wilder, and she's really big in that whole primitive skills and outdoor world and stuff like that. But I ended up on a lot of trips like that, and she and a few other people would come to my schools. So I ended up having a really sort of alternative, unique childhood where I was in really rural places all the time, and that kind of was my like daycare or my entertainment. And then I also ended up at, middle schools and high schools that where, we'd have people that were really cool and come and do like talks or classes or field trips with us, or like, forging classes I got at some of my really early little elementary school days.
Really?
So, yeah. So
interesting. Here in Montana?
Well, I actually spent a lot of time back and forth. So I was born in Missoula and then lived in St. Ignatius out in the middle of nowhere for a while. And then about the time I was ready to go to school, we were back and forth a lot from Northern California. So pretty much the middle of nowhere, up in like Humboldt County. So my dad was back and forth a lot, kind of building a business out there. Mm-hmm. And I spent all my summers in Montana and as much other time as we could. And then the rest of the time we were kind of out there. So I did a lot of school, at little tiny, private school, because, they're pretty strict about having to be a resident or whatever for school over there. So, naturally, especially living out in the middle of nowhere, you ended up at little tiny, cool little private schools.
Yeah, because those talks and those little seminars or assemblies or whatever with a forging guy or something like that's not real typical for like a public school.
You don't get that at like a public school. These were like Waldorf schools, which are pretty interesting.
Were your parents into this stuff at all?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say so much the hunting. Definitely the outdoor stuff. I mean, my mom was a canoe guide in the Everglades.
Oh, really?
She's from Michigan, yeah. And she did a lot of like outdoor leadership kind of stuff, like Knowles and Outward Bound. And then, my dad's a 6th generation Montanan. I mean, they grew up dirt poor in eastern Montana and hunted and stuff, but more for like subsistence. And then he worked for the Forest Service and stuff forever, did, fire and Forest Service work. And then he used to go to like a primitive skills gathering out in Idaho called Rabbit Stick, a bunch. And, he had a bunch of things that he had from there, like hand drill kits and
really
some bows and stuff. But I don't think he'd really dabbled in that for a long time. So I got to just kind of find that stuff laying around from him, or get to meet people that he knew from back in the day that would teach me cool stuff. But I think really the first time that I can remember being into that stuff is definitely probably like 6 or 7.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I've been saying this about public schools, but schools in general, that they should have more people come in and speak and talk about, I think earlier in a child's life, especially in that 5th, 6th grade age range, when you start to lose kids, they start to get attitudes and they start to wonder why they're in school and they start to question authority. And if you brought more people in from the trades per se, and then also from more of the art backgrounds or outdoor backgrounds, all these different things, I think schools should be bringing people in constantly, telling kids about their stories. Because I think a lot of people would end up in the end saying like, hey, you might not need to be a straight A student, but you should pay attention to some level. You should try to get some decent grades, and here's why. Whether it's, if you look at these days with like social media and stuff, even just learning to write, people write posts almost every single day. Well, if you can't write, you sound like an idiot. That's not going to help your
Exactly.
business. And then also you end up finding that you do have to do, stuff on the computer. Even in the industry we're in, with what you guys are doing downstairs, you have to be able to learn and know how to run spreadsheets on a computer and, do simple math and organize and take notes and stay on point, and stay on track. And I think if kids heard that from someone like you, it may make them just pay a little bit more attention in school instead of just being completely blowing it all off, or give them even reason to finish school instead of dropping out.
Right.
Exposing kids to forging or primitive fire making, or, it's not that most of these kids are going to end up making a career in it, but I think it is a more well-rounded education than just, ABCs.
Exactly. Well, I mean, obviously that's not like a normal thing that happens at those schools, but there was two in particular that I remember very clearly that were somewhat life-changing for me, not in the way that I made a career out of them, but in the way that they exposed me to things I didn't know about necessarily before, or maybe I did but didn't have access to them. Mm-hmm. And they created definitely hobbies. And I think it's really important also for kids to have hobbies and things that they're interested in outside of school, because a lot of times it's just, you're provided with certain things that are choices, like sports, like swimming or basketball or whatever, and then academics. And then outside of that, I mean, kids can do whatever, but, a lot of my friends growing up didn't really have anything outside of that they did. And it just became kind of a grind. And I think that I had a lot of other things that I was really, really fired up about doing and really motivated to do. And I wanted time to go do those things. So I think that was a huge motivator in getting good grades in school. Is I just want to get this out of the way so that I can go do the things that I want to do.
That's a good point. The athletics thing, where we grew up in Montana, in most places, a lot of the places in Montana, if you have a pulse, you're pretty much on the team. But there's a lot of places, I mean, the high school you went to a certain degree, and then for sure at bigger schools in bigger parts of the country, if you want to be on the varsity team, in Montana, you might be considered a standout. So if you happen to grow up in Chicago or somewhere like that, and you don't quite have the athleticism to hang, and you can't necessarily participate in sports, even if you want to, you just don't have necessarily the ability. And then there's a lot of kids that they just don't want to. It's just not their thing. It's a really good point. Like, what else is there? If you're not a sports kid, or if you can't quite hang or make it, then what is going to fill your free time?
Right.
And that's a good point, that whether it's going out and shooting your bow or hiking or, getting into crafts, or, me as a kid, when I was in sports, but I also made knives.
And I'm sure that was impressive for people too, to see at an early age, like that you're motivated and doing something, and it's something that's yours, that, you're kind of taking ownership of outside of what you're actually supposed to be doing, or on top of that. And that helped me a lot early on too. Like, I made not like the level that you did, but I did a lot of knife making and other stuff when I was a little kid. And that actually got me into some other like scholarships into private schools. I won here in Missoula. Sussex School is an outdoor school.
Oh, really?
That I went to the later part of middle school in, and that was really cool for me too. I mean, that was a whole other opportunity that was really great. But, you have to apply to get into there, and the kids have to write a paper.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I hand wrote an essay about, it was just something that you like to do. Mm-hmm. Tell us about yourself and something you like to do. And I think this was in like 6th grade or something. And I wrote actually something about knife making.
Oh, really?
And I sent him a picture of one of them.
Do you still have that paper?
Probably they do. It was a handwritten. So all the schools I'd went to before, we weren't allowed to use computers or phones or anything. Like, everything was made out of wood. It was a really interesting situation, but we had to handwrite all our papers in cursive. So it was a 3-page essay handwritten in cursive.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's still around, but I mean, it wasn't a really big deal, but
yeah.
They ended up letting me in, which was really cool. But little things like that, I mean, I think it's so important for kids to have hobbies and to be encouraged and given the freedom to do things that they want to do naturally on their own.
Well,
on top of doing team sports and things, because those things have value as well. But I really do think that, like, whether it's knitting or whatever, like, it doesn't matter what it is.
Well, it opens up a creative part of your brain. Like you say, if you're knitting or if you're making knives, or when I was a kid, I would take, I don't know where I would get them, where my mom would find them, but I would take, I'd get huge bags of popsicle sticks, and I would cut out and like use hot glue gun and make stuff like I'd make dog sleds out of out of popsicle sticks, and I would just make stuff, gluing them together and cutting them and painting them, and it was more of like a arts and crafts thing. But again, it's like you're not going to make dog sleds out of popsicle sticks for a living, but I think it does open up a creative part of your brain that maybe, as much as I love sports, maybe sports doesn't do.
Right.
And your academics don't necessarily do. And you did do sports in high school to a certain degree, right?
I did. Not a ton of team sports. I mean, I did soccer all through elementary and middle school, and then, I was also kind of one of those adrenaline junkie kids that was always jumping off bridges and doing flips and skiing and stuff too. I mean, I got taken out of soccer pretty early. I sprained my ankle and pretty much said, fuck that. Mm-hmm. And then started running. So I did
you excelled in track, right?
Yeah, I did mid-distance sprinting and cross country, which, like you said, in Montana is hard because, if you got to be really good to be good. I mean, it's not like Texas, but like so there was like 7 spots on our varsity cross country team, and I was like in the top 2 spots on the JV team. But the times that Hellgate was running for cross country, we had like a varsity team and then a JV, like A team, and then one underneath it or whatever. I mean, it was all one team, but like if you sectioned our top, 7, 14, 21 kids into groups of 7, like all top 21 of us were like beating the varsity teams of every other school.
Yeah, Hellgate's known for their cross country team.
Right.
They win.
So it wasn't like on varsity, but it was still cool. I mean, you were running with a lot of really good kids.
Right.
And then I did like skiing, like big mountain free ride skiing up at Snow Bowl. So we got to travel around and do that a little bit. Mm-hmm. That was really cool. That's something I'd done since I was 2 years old. My dad was really, really into skiing and put me on a pair of skis at 2 years old at Snow Bowl. And,
you guys skied down Utah quite a bit and all over.
Yeah, down Salt Lake. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that I ended up kind of backing off on, taking the foot off the gas, got, a little reckless and overconfident, and ended up blowing up my knee real bad, which I'm still trying to recover from a little bit, 3 or 4 years later. But I did that a lot, but not a lot of team sports, a lot of individual type stuff, which I sort of regret looking back on it, but that was just kind of the stuff I excelled at.
Right. Well, the problem with my kids are big into the team sports, and it's funny. I think you can look back and always regret or wonder if you should have done it different. And the issue with team sports is then you're so beholden to that team for 3 months that it does close opportunities. My kids haven't done a ton of skiing because they're in team sports literally the entire winter.
Right.
They'll make state in basketball, or at least Sadie's team for sure will. And when they're all done with state, they'll start track 2 days later on Monday, so there's just very little time. So, I think you probably would have been the kind of kid that would have excelled in whatever path you took, but unfortunately you just can't do it all.
Right. And I had so much other stuff like I talked about before. I mean, I had so much other stuff that I wanted to do all the time, and especially right there in like sophomore year of high school, that's right when I was discovering like bow hunting and elk hunting and stuff before, which I'd hunted a little bit, but not like really in the way that I do now. And my buddies and I started like to kind of discover that together and really go out and do that. And, they'd be like, hey, play football. Like you're running, sub 12-second 100-meter dash times, which is like not crazy fast, but like you could be like a really good running back.
Yeah.
And I was huge as a freshman. I mean, I probably haven't grown since sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
But I walked in there as a 6'1.5", 185.
Right.
Like huge kid. So they wanted me to be playing football, and that was in the fall, right? And I was like, fuck that. There's no way that I'm
going hunting.
Yeah, I'm going hunting.
Yeah. What, it's interesting these days with the way people kind of shit on young people, or, I think every generation thinks the young people are, don't have their shit together or whatever. But I've actually argued several times that I feel quite the opposite with, as you can tell around here, I've generally hired young people. Mm-hmm. I enjoy the vibe, the enthusiasm, the excitement for life. Like, young people have everything ahead of them. They're not really looking back with a lot of regret. And, you also can kind of mold the people into what you need. But back to the young person thing, as people parent, I think one of our biggest problems we have is people want to blame the young people. But if we have some shithead young people, it's probably because the parents did a poor job of raising a kid. As far as parenting goes, what did your parents do that was maybe a bit different? I mean, some of it's probably personality, some of it's DNA and the way you're born, but also, like, how did your parents, were they fairly heavy-handed? Were they strict? Were they really loose? Like, what was their style?
They were extremely hands-off. I think, on a much higher level than a lot of people would even like to know. I mean, they were not in a bad way. Like, there was always a safety net there. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just really made sure that I knew that, if you mess up, it's no big deal, but you can kind of do whatever you want. Like, I never had a curfew growing up. There was never really, I never got grounded. There was really nothing that I couldn't do. They gave me tons of freedom and a boatload of trust, like right off the bat. And that felt kind of heavy to me right away. Like, just them dumping a bunch of trust. Like, my dad would be like, give me a 10-minute lesson on how to drive a stick shift giant, 1-ton work truck, and then be like, hey, you're going to follow me out to the cabin. Right. I'm going to drive my truck and you're going to drive this work truck.
Right.
And I'd be scared shitless, pretty young, no driver's license or whatever. And I'd be like, okay, we're going to do it. But he'd also, let me go out there and stay out there with my friends. And they let me go camp by myself, like way up in the Rattlesnake Wilderness in like 7th grade. They're just like, yeah, you got warm stuff. Cool. You know what you're doing. Like, you camped in the yard enough to know, like, if you're going to be cold or not. Mm-hmm. And some people would argue that that's not a smart move, to let little kids go do that stuff on their own. But at the same time, I think all those things were such passions of mine that they kind of really trusted me. Yeah. And, we did our fair share of stupid shit in high school. Mm-hmm. And probably a lot of us are a little bit lucky, but, for the most part, they gave me a lot of freedom and a lot of trust, especially as a very small young kid. And also, asked a lot of me in return, but they never told me to get good grades. They always was ask me how my day went and help me with homework and ask me how they could help me do better. But I never was forced to get A's, and I never was told that I couldn't do anything if I didn't get A's. Mm-hmm. They'd just be like, well, why not? So I kind of felt like I wanted to do that stuff for myself. Like, I almost was bummed out that they didn't, that they weren't like pushing me to do that like everybody else. So I wanted to see if I could push myself to do it. Yeah. Which I think part of that, I mean, clearly there's a lot of kids out there that have parents that are hands off and they turn out
kids are shit show.
Not so great. Yeah. But I think that my parents were very intentionally hands off. I mean, if they felt like there was a situation where they needed to step in, they would, but at any point they would.
Yeah, that's where I think
back off.
You obviously kind of were born with a certain kind of personality that also just worked, and they didn't have to necessarily step in, Because I mean, your mom talks about what you were like as a kid, and that you were pretty damn easy to parent. It's not like, it doesn't sound like you gave them a real hard run for their money necessarily.
No, I mean, I saw them. I would go to my friends' houses and I would see how hard they were getting driven, and I would feel kind of lucky that I didn't have to deal with that, and I didn't want to make their lives hard. I wanted to impress them for the most part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's similar to the way that I was. My parents were a little more strong-willed, but I think are a little bit more involved in certain ways, or as far as, driving, but also in another way, very similar from the fact that, like, my dad would teach me, like you say, something with the dump truck, and then it was like, all right, let's go. And I had a ton of responsibility that was just given to me. And like you say, not really putting in a situation where I'm going to kill myself, but, it's funny too, because like I grew up in an era really different than you, where we didn't have cell phones. So like there had to be some level of trust. Like when you left the house, there wasn't like the constant helicopter parent check-in situation,
Right.
Where I think kids these days, and even though you had cell phones, I think you were more largely left alone, or especially you go up in the rattlesnake wilderness or whatever without cell phone coverage. But
I didn't even have one until sophomore year of high school. They wouldn't, that was another thing. They didn't really want me to have one of those either.
Yeah.
Like, none of my friends did. I think we were right on the edge of that.
Where it became more mainstream.
I think like the next year or the next couple years.
Yeah.
Like my brother got a phone at the same time I did, and he was, 12.
Yeah.
I was 16.
Right. Became more normal. Yeah. And that's where I think parents these days need to resist the temptation to constantly be texting in communication. I try to actually heed my own advice on that. Because a lot of times you're checking in as a parent and you're asking for an update or whatever, just to make you feel good. The kid's fine. Like, you probably know if the kid's not fine. Like, they're probably going to call you or somebody's going to. But I think we end up with a bit of a helicopter parent situation, which in turn ends up making kids that are more dependent. Because even though they don't necessarily maybe want it at the time or whatever, they do get used to being constantly checked on or constantly guided, where the way you grew up, the way I grew up, you also kind of had to figure things out as well. You didn't have I'll just pick up the phone and call and ask real quick.
Right.
You had to make a decision. Sometimes it's the wrong one. You might get your ass chewed later.
Yep.
But you were put in a position to make decisions for sure.
100%. Yeah. And then, to go along with that, my dad was always moving stuff around, or, had a bunch of pile of work to do on the farm. And I would, he would give us all option, we had a couple little chores or whatever, feed the chickens, do this or do that. But it wasn't like a crazy laundry list of stuff to do. Mm-hmm. Not like a real farm, like a little homestead. We always had chickens and goats and stuff around the house. Mm-hmm. But every once in a while he'd have something crazy to do, or a couch to move or whatever. And he'd give me an option. Hey, do you want to help me with this? Like, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can. And I'd always say yes. And then in turn, when I needed something or wanted a new backpack or a knife or a anvil or whatever, he would go out of his way to kind of get it for me.
Sure.
And that that really early on too instilled trust. I mean, he, on top of like letting me have a pocket knife probably before I should have.
Right.
Letting me take out a rifle by myself probably before I should have.
Mm-hmm.
Giving me responsibility. They also, I think, did a great job with giving me a real life example of how work ethic should kind of go.
Yeah.
And that didn't always equate to me, like working and having money,
right.
But showing me that, if I by my own free will go out of my way, to go the extra mile and help out, that I'm going to get rewarded later down the line,
right,
when something comes up.
Was it a burden having such a good looking mom?
Yeah, you have no idea. It was pretty tough. It's still pretty tough.
I know. Every now and then we have to remind you.
Yeah.
talk about how hot your mom is.
Yeah.
She's a sweetheart, though. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's a really amazing human.
Yeah, for sure. My wife loves her. So, now that you're kind of getting out of high school, you started working for us while you were actually technically still in high school. That was in 2020 COVID year, like you said. And it was interesting because when you started working for me, I was still a lineman.
Yeah, you were.
I was still working my full-time job. So
Yeah.
you would, there were some times actually in the summertime, I think you came over and worked during the day when I was still at work.
Well, I did. You have to take still in high school with a grain of salt, because those last 2 years, junior and senior year, were the peak of the lockdown or whatever you want to call it.
That's true, yeah.
So we were doing school essentially online. And then later on, and that's a whole other story. I mean, we took that and ran with it hard. I mean, I did very little school those last 2 years. I did a lot of shed hunting. I did a lot of camping. I did a lot of mountain biking.
Yeah.
Did a lot of skiing. Did very little schoolwork.
Yeah.
Which, double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
But that year that I started, we had a block schedule. So I would go to class from I essentially had the same thing that a college kid would have.
Mm-hmm.
I had 10 a.m. to 1, and then I'd drive out to Frenchtown after school.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember, working in that old shop, and, in the beginning, we were just trying to kind of get things going, and was having you help out a bit, having Connor help out a bit. When we actually started making the speed goats, I guess it would have been kind of like spring of 21 when we were making, or in the winter, we were making speed goats. Because I remember Connor was going to college at the U, and I would drive a box of speed goat blades into Connor, drop off a couple rolls of paracord, a vise, all this stuff, and he would tie speed goats in his dorm room.
Which we did. Sadie and I would do that too. We'd take them home and do them in our bedrooms after we got done with homework.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny.
And I had another guy kind of helping, and then he would be kind of lazy and not tie for a while, and then I'd get him back and they'd be jacked up. And finally I had to be like, okay, we're only going to do this at the shop, because I was getting varying quality. I really never had any problem with Connor or yourself. Sadie, you guys' stuff was good, but it was interesting because what year did you technically graduate?
21.
Yeah. So in 21, I remember through the summer, it kind of was like, well, am I going to go to college or not? And like you say, you were going to kind of take a gap year, and then through 21, things really started to take off for the company, and you were working at that point full time.
Right.
What were your early thoughts of MKC, say in the summertime, once you were done with high school, of where you thought it was going?
I mean, I could see right away that, it was going somewhere, and I could tell that the way that, I'd worked my ass off all through high school, right? I'd worked for actually another company that we sort of work with now a little bit, Whiskey Leather Works. I'd worked for them since my freshman year of high school. Every day after school, I'd go there and make leather stuff for extra money. Mm-hmm. And I'd worked for a couple of, my dad and his friends' businesses, doing stuff with wine barrels and, some deconstruction, a couple of restaurant jobs here and there. But right away, even having worked more than a lot of kids my age, still not having tons of experience, I could tell right away that the way that you and Brandon were starting to operate, at the size that it was probably going to be something. And knowing what I did about, gear and the outdoor industry and stuff, being the complete nerd that I am, I could tell that there was not really a whole bunch out there like what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and you had kind of told me where you were trying to take the thing. Mm-hmm. And I could tell that you were not like a half measure kind of guy. So,
yeah.
I could tell that it was going somewhere, but at the same time, I had worked hard in high school, and I felt like I had an obligation to myself to to take all that effort and use it to do something with.
Right.
And in my mind, you know, you grow up and everyone, you know, college is pushed pretty hard these days. And I don't know if it's pushed as hard as it used to be or not, but, you know, it was not, to be clear, it was not presented to me as the only option, but it was definitely presented to me as the best option.
Yeah.
And an option where you really couldn't go wrong. And I definitely felt a lot of pressure. I mean, I had all my family members, not necessarily my parents. I shouldn't say that. Not that they didn't want me to go. Mm-hmm. They 100% did. But really, you know, like my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, family, friends, everyone was during that period was kind of like, hey, when you going to Bozeman?
Well, and it was kind of a long period too. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, it's just 2021 summertime. Okay, no. I mean, like you say, you kind of knew you might take a gap year anyway. So, you know, we worked through the winter, and I definitely remember, like, we had a really good year in 21, but still, it was 2 or 3 of us around here, a couple of us, and then, I think where the pressure ramped up the most for you was in the summer of 2022, because you'd taken a gap year at that point. We were definitely clearly still growing a lot, but I remember those conversations because it was an awkward spot a little bit for me, because I knew, like, what I wanted was for you to stick it out here. But I also tried to be as hesitant as I could to, like, tell you what you should do. Just because I definitely didn't want you someday, like, there was still no guarantees, still isn't any guarantees with where a company was going to go, where it can go. And I knew where I thought it could go, and I knew where I wanted to take it. But there was no way for me to sit across the table for you and be like, we're going to be this size of company. You're going to have this particular opportunity. You know, and I remember you really wavering back and forth, like, gosh, should I go to college? Because you're right, you did put in all that work in high school and got really good grades, and you had scholarships, and you really had a ton of opportunity for college. But on the same hand, it's interesting how people view high school and college. The reason that you go and get great grades in high school, the reason you get great grades in college is to end up with a good job. Like, right. That's the purpose. Well, that's one of the purposes behind college. I know the one thing that we talked about that you were missing a little bit was the other side of college is the college experience.
The social aspect.
Right. So there's academics, which is directly related to trying to get a job. And then there's a social aspect of just being a kid and having fun and, you know, meeting friends, expanding your network. And it was a challenging thing for me to you know, because I felt strongly that if you stuck it out, we're the kind of people that we will bring you along over years. Now, if you look at a college degree, I mean, that's 4 years, right? And then when you get out of college, you generally go into a company, and it takes you 4 to 10 years to move up after college to a real, like, senior position. You know, so you're looking 10 to 15 years after high school graduation before you find yourself in a pretty heavy leadership role, making like a really, really good salary.
Right.
And it's interesting. I know we even talked about it even after 22 going into 23 last year. There was still you were a little unsure at times and back and forth. And I remember I'd asked you, like, well, what would you do if you went and got a degree in college? And you'd be like, well, I'd probably try to find a job in the outdoor industry. Like, you even said you may try to come back and, like, work for us at that point. And my answer was like, well, we're gonna give you the same training. Essentially, it's the equivalent of kind of like an apprenticeship. Like, when I did my apprenticeship for a lineman, you're paid to learn along the way in advance, and you end up kind of after 4 years with a college degree. But even then, they turn you out as a journeyman lineman. They still don't trust you really to be like the foreman.
Right.
You still have years to go. But what do you kind of remember from those decisions, and how do you feel about it now?
Well, I remember that there was the initial pressure, right, versus this is actually really cool, and I enjoy doing this. Right off the bat, I enjoy working here. I'm learning a ton. This is allowing me to have a lifestyle that am really enjoying right off the bat. And I've always, even through high school, I mean, that's why I worked through high school. I had way less fun than all my friends. And I was not like, I wasn't like the kids that did 8 hours of homework a day because they had 14 classes for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
I was more like the kid that was like, okay, I'm going to buy a car. There's things that I want to go do. I want to go do road trips. I want to go on flights. I'm going to pay for that stuff. So there was that aspect. So I had already started to enjoy the freedom of being able to do that. And then once I started working here, that just got accelerated through, my friends living in a dorm room or whatever. And I'm still living at home for the first little while, which was very nice of my mom to let me do. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, I moved out probably a year or 6 months in. But I remember that there was that aspect where I enjoyed the lifestyle. I was making a little bit of money. I could go and do stuff that I wanted to do. I could have stuff that I wanted to have. I had my weekends I had after work, and I enjoyed being at work. And then on the other side, I had, pressure from my family, pressure from, just social norms to try to go to college and, quote, do something with my life. So that was a little bit confusing for me initially.
Yeah.
And then I remember reaching a point, I think it was probably that Big Sky TAC 22. I remember actually that's kind of when I talked to my dad about it. And, I did have scholarships and stuff. There was going to be a little bit of leftover stuff to pay. And he was like super adamant on sending me, he was honestly the biggest reason that I stayed. I mean, he gave me tons of freedom because he got a degree and didn't use it and still ended up fine and all that stuff. So he really wanted to make sure that I knew that college wasn't the only path and that he wasn't pushing me into that. Mm-hmm. But he also was like, look, like I have the means right now to completely pay for the rest of whatever's going to be left over for your college.
Right.
And I'm willing to do that for at least the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. And this opportunity, like my ability to do this is not going to be forever. And I'm not going to re-offer this
right
5-10 years from now. Like he's like, you kind of got to take me up on this or not.
Right.
Like, cause at this point it's been a year, right? Like a full year. My gap year has ended.
Right.
So now, and then the last thing that I want to do is decide 6 months from now that I'm not making the right decision, go back to college, have that window have closed,
right,
and then end up with a bunch of debt,
right.
So that weighed a little bit heavy on me, and that, I think he was right to do that because he could see my internal struggle and he just wanted to get that off my plate. Yeah. Really, I think is what the deal was. But whether or not that was the case, he was kind of like, hey, you're like, if you want me to help you out with this, you kind of got to go now.
Right.
Otherwise, you commit to this. It seems like you're doing great. Seems like this is going somewhere. Like I believe in it 100%. Do what you want to do, but just know if this is the path that you want to take, if college is the path that you want to take right now, you kind of got to commit to going.
Right.
And at least starting soon.
Right.
And he followed that up with, do you know what you would do yet if you went and did that? And I had always said, as far back as I can remember, I just don't want a desk job. I want to do something that I like doing. And for the longest time, I thought that might be like guiding or something, like something like really with a lot of dirt time. But I didn't really love the idea of making literally zero money. So, I kind of had to make a decision there. And I remember talking to Brandon about it too. Mm-hmm. And he had some different opinions than you did. Mm-hmm. But there again, he was kind of like, you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. You'll be either way, you're getting an education. And part of the reason that I did decide to stay was because I wanted to go to school for business management or business marketing, right? Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to have my own business someday. Mm-hmm. And when I sat back and looked at it, I realized how silly that was because I'm sitting here watching you guys build a business literally from the ground up, the way that it should be done, clearly, because of the way that it's going, right? And, you know, certain people could argue this or that, but the reality of the matter was that you guys were starting from scratch and building something block by block, you know, brick by brick, piece by piece, doing it the way that, in my mind, you should, and doing it in a way that I really respected. You know, the American made, the not outsourcing things, stuff that just made a lot of sense to me, and exactly the way, quite frankly, that in my imagination, maybe I would have wanted to do it someday. So I kind of sat back and looked at it and I said, why would I go learn how to run a business or start a business from someone that's, quite frankly, probably never done it in their life.
Right.
Well, and rather than just watching it happen in real time,
you are building a business. Like you're literally a part of it.
Right.
You know, it's like, you're watching it, but you're also literally involved, and you're not maybe necessarily making a lot of the big decisions or whatever, but also the, you know, like when Andrew came along, it gives you the opportunity to work under a PhD business management professor every single day.
Exactly.
You know, on real actual life problems, you know, versus hypothetical problems in a textbook in school. And again, it's not that I don't value college. I think if you know what you want to go into and you go to a good school, you get a ton of value out of that. But you just happen to have such a unique opportunity in a space that you already had interest in to learn, and get paid to learn. And in the beginning, you were definitely not making much for money from us.
No.
But that was the other thing that I had told you, like you hang with it, we grow, you'll grow. Now you're making a lot better money and you're managing people. But it's still really the beginning of all of that as well. I mean, you're, kind of in those like 101 or 201 level classes.
Right. There is a safety net for sure.
Yeah. And you've got that professor behind you that's making sure things are good, but there'll be a day and a time when you've learned enough that you're actually the safety net for someone else, you know?
Right.
But it's interesting because I think at times a lot of people also want everything so fast, but sometimes it's hard for me to believe, because what are you, 21 now?
21, yep.
Where you're sitting at 21 with your position in our company, with your responsibility and what you're doing, man, it's special. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's gone, you know, if you look at it from a big picture standpoint, it's accelerated extremely quickly.
Yeah.
Astronomically quickly, except for, you know, every day that you're sitting here doing what you're doing, it probably feels like a snail's pace.
Yeah, it's funny because I say that, like, I think to all of us, yourself included, at times it feels slow and frustrating that we want to do more, grow more, you want to advance more, you want to get paid more, like we want to do more of everything. But then you sit around and yesterday I was telling the bankers kind of that we were meeting with about the story from kind of start to finish of the last 3 or 4 years. And it's like, holy shit, we've done a lot too. Like, it's gone so fast. And it's, I don't know, it's just a really, really special, unique thing that I think someday books might be written about, you know.
I think it is important
it might be you writing the book.
Right. I think it is important to recognize too, though, that isn't really normal. And the position that I was in, I mean, it would be different if I wanted to be like a architect or an engineer or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, or a dentist or something like that. But I think the fact of the matter is I absolutely didn't want to do that. So for me, it made sense. And I think that that's not the right thing to do for the majority of people. But I think it's definitely important for people, you know, especially people my age, to know that it's not the only option. And I think that's becoming more widely accepted. But
I'm so adverse to young people having unnecessary debt.
Right.
Now, college debt, if you know, like you say, if you want to be an engineer or doctor or whatever it is, it requires that training and licenses and, those things is, that kind of debt's not bad at all. But boy, I see a lot of people go to school. They start into school. Let's say you're interested in the outdoor world and everything and all these things of the person that you are, but you try to go to school for engineering because that's what the world tells you to do. And you're 3 years in and you're just finally fed up and you're like, screw it. And you get out and you're 30, 40 grand in debt. Or more, people that even go longer than that and end up with so much debt. And I remember I'd also told you, like, if you want to go have those experiences, you've done a good job of staying relatively single. You haven't been married, you don't have kids, you're young, you're making a good wage. Like, there's no reason that every now and then you can't blow some money and pay to go on a hell of a trip, an experience.
Right.
Or go to the sheep show and win one.
Right. Yeah.
You just won a sheep hunt where?
I did in Spain.
You wouldn't have won that in college.
Nope. Yeah, there's actually a hilarious clip that Riley filmed of me screaming "fuck college."
Really?
I said I'd like to quote Kip Folks, "fuck college."
Really?
Yeah.
On stage?
No, in the hallway.
But, that is beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, that's because you were getting some advice during all those few years from Kip Folks as well, who had helped start Under Armour. He's on our board.
Kip had very strong opinions on college, which I will not repeat, but you got the gist of it from my
that's hilarious
2-word quote there.
That's hilarious. Well, I mean, it's not
in my specific case.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, that's the thing. There's no perfect piece of advice that fits across all boards. Like you have to, or all people, you have to know. I just think I think we had something special going. I think you were a certain kind of person. That's the other thing I tell people, like, it's one thing that with you being a role model in this company, like we didn't give you anything. You haven't been given anything. You earned. I mean, I think you started off at like $12 an hour. Mm-hmm. You've earned your pay raises. You've earned your bonuses. You've earned your respect with our company. And that's the other thing when I hire people, when I interview and I ask 30 and 40-year-old guys, like, hey, do you have problems taking orders from a kid? Because like you're going to consider some of your bosses here kids in your eyes. Because some of your people that you're managing have kids your age and older. But to me, age isn't a thing. Like I can't stand like in high school sports, the like, well, he's playing more because he's a senior. That freshman's better. I'm playing that freshman, and so to me, an age thing is I only judge people on what they put out, and your ability to communicate has always been really good too. Like going to shows. I don't know what your parents did, but that's another thing I was able to really do well as a kid. And I tell people like all the time, like forget calculus and forget half of the math classes. Learn how to talk. Learn how to communicate with people you don't know.
And that's opened a million opportunities for me beyond right here. And I actually, I attribute that to my parents a lot. And they were always on me about certain things that I did. Like if I walk into a room still to this day and I don't say hi to everyone that's in that room, including the little kids, my mom would be like, hey, can you like acknowledge everyone in the room? There's also one of those schools that I did go to, one of those Waldorf schools across the board, that curriculum, which I like and also hate for a myriad of reasons. But one of the things that they did standard was every time you walk into a classroom, everyone walked in a single file line, one at a time, and the teacher on the way in shook your hand, said good morning or good afternoon or whatever it was, and you were not allowed to go into that classroom unless you firmly shook their hand and made direct eye contact and said good morning.
Perfect.
And that's one thing that I even notice with a lot of my friends that have grown up with phones and things. Mm-hmm. They're not able to make eye contact. Like if you talk to like a 20-year-old or a on down to like 15 now, if you try to have a conversation with them, their eyes are like ping, 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 ping. Like they're either like doing this number where they're looking at their phone and then back up at you, or they're uncomfortable with what to do with their hands or where to look with their eyes, you know? Like, I think it's a very foreign thing for young people these days to be able to just sit there with zero distractions and look at someone's face and have a conversation.
Well, and I encourage my kids, trying to get them to even take like speech and debate or something, which again, it happens to be during the middle of basketball season and they're worried about missing games and all that. But you're in a position now where every week you have to get up in front of a bunch of people and talk.
That is an invaluable skill. And that's another thing that I regret not doing in high school and taking advantage of. But I also think that it's something that you can learn at any point in your life. Yeah. I mean, it's not an unlearnable skill. It's just, it does take constant practice.
It just takes a little bit of guts to get up and kind of suck at it at first, which I don't think that's much different than any skill. I mean, if you decide at 30 years old you want to learn how to golf, you're going to go out on the driving range in front of other people and you're going to suck.
Right.
You know, or shoot a bow. You're going to go to tack and you're going to be the guy in the group that sucks.
It's the same with anything. I mean, you cannot be afraid to mess up a couple times.
Right.
Or a lot. I mean, you're going to mess up.
Yeah. So what's your favorite kind of hunting that you like to do?
I mean, I really like elk hunting for sure.
I thought you were going to say road hunting out of a truck.
Road hunting out of a truck. No, before I was a hunter, I was a really, hardcore kind of backpacker. And I would just go and my friends and I would get out after school and put headlamps on and truck up to a mountain lake.
Well, it concerned me when you first started with us. I remember it was the spring of 21 and it was probably March. And I think it was a Friday, and I was asking you what you were going to do this weekend, and you were like, well, I'm going to go up into the Rattlesnake Wilderness and shed hunt or some shit. And it was like kind of pissing rain outside, half rain, half snow, and at 3,500 feet. And I was like, bro, it's going to be the shittiest weather. Like, this is the weather. People always think about, like, December weather, you freeze to death. No.
Right.
You freeze to death in, like, April. In May.
100%.
When it's wet, cold snow, you're not prepared with the right gear. You think it's going to be nice weather, and then it comes in, it snows a foot, and all your wood's wet, and all your bag and everything's wet, and you're freezing to death. So I was like, because I didn't know you that well yet, and I was like, damn, this kid's like 18 years old, and he's going out this weekend. Like, it's not smart. And sure enough, you came back, and you had like a whole pack full of sheds. I was like, holy shit. That's when I was like, that was kind of the moment I'm like, this kid's pretty freaking legit.
Well, for me,
that's why I said that about road hunting, because you're the kind of guy that's like,
right.
Last year, wasn't it, where you backpacked in for whitetail and almost killed yourself?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I didn't have a whole lot of a choice either. Like, only recently do I have a all badass souped up truck that I can go drive up dirt roads with. But for the most part, all through high school, my access was confined to what I can get to with a 4-wheel drive Subaru, which is actually kind of a lot, but I enjoyed just and I found that I had better success pulling off a freeway in a spot that's not a trailhead and just climbing up and over the top of a mountain and dropping back down in somewhere. But really, the reason that I like to hunt the way that I do now is because my first passion before hunting was just being out there. So just that being out there and surviving and having fun in shitty weather and in the mountains and carrying heavy stuff around. I mean, that exclusively was what I did for fun before I hunted. And I always wanted to hunt. I just didn't have access to the information. I didn't have access to the land. I didn't have access to this or that. And it was really great. Like, I probably started killing stuff when I was 12. Mm-hmm. Like, my dad's friend would take me out and I would do the youth hunt and I'd shoot a doe, a mile in or on somebody's big ranch that we would knock on the door on or whatever. Right. So I did that a bunch, but I really never was in a situation where I was, could find like a big buck or a bull or whatever, to go try to find and shoot. And I always really wanted to do that, but I also didn't have anyone to go with or anyone that had the knowledge. And I ended up meeting a couple guys in high school, really one in particular. Still, I hunt with him almost exclusively. Harrison, he had heard me talking about wanting to go hunt, sitting in the cafeteria at lunch one time. He was like, well, where do you think you're going to go? He was just kind of picking my brain, like, because this kid was already a badass. I mean, his dad was super gnarly and had gone to Alaska a bunch and killed a ton of elk. And he's at this point, his sophomore year in high school, he's already killed like 3 or 4 huge bulls with his bow.
Yeah.
And I told him kind of where I was thinking about going, because I'd gone and driven out and done backpacking trips and seen elk tracks and stuff, but I didn't really know anything about how that stuff worked. I was really good tracker, really good hiker, had the camping thing just dialed in beyond what most people did. And he was like, no shit, that's actually where I'm going next weekend.
Yeah.
And that was like the weekend before opening weekend of rifle season. And we drove after school out there, hiked way up, set up, glassed, and ended up seeing a bachelor herd of like 6 bulls. And they were still fighting like on October 14th or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I got to see bull elk like sparring, and I was like, oh my God, like tomorrow morning's opening day. Like, and I'm shitting my pants. Like, we actually just hiked up here, saw them. This is totally, we could do this. And mind you, like, I've done crazy stuff already at this point in my life. Like, I've gone out for 6-7 days at a time. Like, I've done loops in the Beartooths, and my idea of fun would be like, oh, I'm going to go do this barefoot. Like, I would literally hike barefoot just because I would thought it was cool to have really tough feet. It's kind of dumb, but like I would go run barefoot or go hike barefoot or whatever. But the hiking is no big deal, but I was kind of a psycho. Like, I didn't have hiking boots. All I had was Chacos. And like I would hike in, no matter what time of year it was, I would hike in Chacos. And during the winter, I was like a hardcore skier, so I didn't really do like winter stuff per se.
Yeah.
As much. I mean, I did. We would go snow camp, but not like, we wouldn't be like going like crazy far in. So we hiked up there the next morning and shot a bull. And during that 8-hour time period, it snowed a foot. So all of a sudden, there's 2 sophomores in high school with a dead elk on the ground 6.5 miles back. And one of them's wearing Chacos and wool socks and wearing Carhartts. So that was one of the most brutal nights of my life.
Yeah.
And by the time we got back, we were so freaking happy. And my mom thought that we were out there doing drugs because my eyes are all sunburned. My eyes are completely bloodshot. I'm like nonverbal. My face is all red. I can't even move. Like, I'm wrecked. From this, because I didn't have a really good pack either. I had like a REI, like Osprey, whatever. Like, they're not meant to really carry weight. Yeah, they're meant to have like 15-pound Pacific Crest Trail hiking setup. They're not meant to put like a fucking elk quarter in. So I'm like, it's all on my shoulders, and we're dragging the other ones in a game bag, and like, it took us like 12 hours to get this thing out, unfortunately. Because we were tiny kids too. Like, I was big, but he was small. But we did fine. But anyway, and moral of the story, we got it out. And it was kind of like an epic deal for us, because it was the first time.
When you were hooked on elk hunting?
Yeah. It was really my first day of elk. If anyone's first day of public land elk hunting went like that, they would probably be hooked too. Yeah. And it wasn't a huge bull or anything. It was like a 5-point, but it was still, to us, like, fucking epic that we could drive 30 minutes out of Missoula, park the car on the side of the road, hike up this mountain, kill an elk, and hike down. And he'd killed elk, but that was the first time that like my buddy had gone without his parents, and we went by ourselves, Sure. I don't even really think our parents like knew that we were going to go do that. Yeah. But we did, and we got home, and they didn't really believe us until we showed up with a bunch of meat. But anyway, from then on, pretty much hooked. And then he and I have hunted together ever since. And we've just continued to kind of push each other. And the reason that we've stayed kind of together is both of us very much have an attitude of, no, we're going to go no matter what. Like, doesn't matter what the weather is. Doesn't matter what I have to do. Doesn't matter if I have to drive. You know, he lives in Bozeman now, so a lot of times we'll meet in the middle.
Yeah.
To go hunt or shed hunt or whatever. But
sure.
One of us will get off of work at 4 or 5, and we'll get in the car and have our stuff packed, and we'll drive out and meet each other in the dark and hike in with a headlamp, or one of us will be in and one of us will, if one of us needs a pack out, we'll drive and meet each other and pack out. But we definitely have a culture between us where, you know, we continue to try to push ourselves harder and harder and harder. And, you know, eventually you always hit ceilings. You know, we've gotten into some sticky spots where, you know, we realize that we're not Aaron Snyder or superheroes or anything. Yeah,
but that's how you become Aaron Snyder. I mean, you know, you guys, the things you're doing at the age you're doing it, I mean, you're still just babies, you know, compared to all us old guys. So you do that stuff for the next 20 years. And do you keep a journal?
I do occasionally. I have like a little Write in the Rain notebook.
It's my biggest regret is not, you know, especially with how much cool stuff I did as a kid. Like, I wish my parents would have made me journal every night. And it's not journal like I'm thinking maybe I'm going to become a woman. Like, I'm struggling with my identity. Like, I'm not talking journaling feelings and emotions and whatever, but just write down what you did that day. You know, maybe you skip a day or two, but like, I think 2 or 3 lines, 4 lines, some of it might be a half of a book by the time you get done from like a hunt like that. Right. Trying to come back and recall what each day was like. But there'll be a day someday where, you know, like the growth of this company, being involved in it early from your perspective, not necessarily from like me and Brandon's. I wish I would have kept a journal all along, and I really should still start it. Should take my own advice. But at 21 years old, even to go back and sit around at night, and go back and try to remember some of the stuff of like the early days of this company, and write some things down of what you can remember today, because 3 more years from now, and however much busier we are and whatever you're going to continue to forget more of it. And then, you know, whether it's work-related stuff or it's personal, hunts with Harrison or, you know, hunts with Melissa or whoever, you should really be writing that stuff down, because there'll be a day you have a grandson that might live in a city somewhere and not do anything in the outdoors, and read about this crazy ass grandpa and the shit he was doing when he was 20 years old, that will mean a lot. You know, and it may inspire that, you know, grandson when he's 14 living in the city to like do shit, you know, because you never know where.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I've done a little bit, but not a ton. And honestly, a lot of what we do is pretty well photo documented. And I, to be honest, don't even post 90% of like what we have from that. A lot of it's like trying to protect backgrounds or whatever.
Right.
But
even the photo stuff, like I think
it doesn't really speak to where you are or what happened, but
no. And also, like, I worry actually that we have, you know, my mom still has negatives from all the old film and stuff. I'm sure your parents have a drawer of that stuff too. But but nowadays you have tens of thousands of photos on your phone, of which probably 3/4 of them are garbage. A quarter of them probably kind of mean something, but like, God, what happens if, like, how is that electronic file going to store for generations? You know, I don't know. Is one person going to accidentally delete it, or is it going to get corrupted, or, but a handwritten journal is, you know, and you just start throwing them in storage and stacking them up in the safe or whatever. Even yourself, when you're 60 years old, you're going to go back and look at some of that stuff. You're going to laugh at yourself. And
well, really, from a work standpoint, I guess we both, Andrew and I, do that. I mean, one of the things, going back to work a little bit, that when he sort of, or I guess you guys all sort of promoted me to the position that I'm in now, he was like, congratulations, you have a notebook now and you write in it every single day. Mm-hmm. Every single thing that you have to do, you write down, and you write the date that you're going to follow up on it. Mm-hmm. You're gonna have a follow up, and you're gonna you're not going to move on from that list until everything's checked off.
Yeah.
And that's how he operates. And I always wondered how he stayed so organized in his brain. And that's been monumentally helpful to me. And it's definitely a skill that I didn't have before that I'm developing. That's allowed me to do a lot more than I was able to do before.
Yep.
Because quite frankly, no one's capable of keeping track of that much in their brain and actually following up on the things they say they're going to do. And I've started to bleed that over into my personal life. But one thing that we have started doing is we'll burn through an entire notebook of checklists and meeting agendas and things in a couple months. But we're starting to have we both keep them. Yeah. So I have the first one from like a year ago.
Yeah.
And I started that even before I started doing what I did now. But anyway, he really made me start doing that, which I'm grateful for. But I have a stack of those, and it is cool to read back through. Like the first one that I have, pages are all messed up and coffee stained and stuff. But it is cool to read through, and it's like rough sketches that you and I made of like the parkerizing tanks, and stuff like that. Like cool. Probably someday will be cool to go back and look at.
For sure.
The problem sets that we had back then versus now.
Yeah. I even, I took a photo of this board of like what we're trying to design the building and stuff. Cause I think some of that stuff will go back and like, God, we were cutting sheets of bright colored paper out like a craft project and taping them to a board to design a building.
Yeah.
But
that stuff's cool to go back and look at too.
What's your favorite part? What's your favorite thing about working for MKC?
My favorite part by far, and this might not be what people expect, but my favorite part by far is to work for, especially the trio of you and Andrew and Brandon. I think is in a very small minority of people in this world that not only in your own pursuits of growing your business or whatever and pushing yourselves forward, have this really, really unique ability to kind of, lead from the ground or lead from the back and lead by example, and not only bring yourselves up, but also bring everyone else up underneath you with you. Like it really does feel like as you guys are growing, everyone else around you is sort of being lifted up as well. And that was really another reason initially that, I decided to stick with it from the beginning, because I don't think the value of that for someone, especially my age, to be given that opportunity and to be given trust right away, and to be allowed to earn responsibility and trust. I don't think that can be overstated. But I really do think that is not something that is common, and it's extremely valuable for me to be able to work in an environment where also I'm pushed. I mean, you guys, I don't think a lot of people know the kind of standards that all three of you hold yourselves to, both in business and in personal life. And I don't think people understand that you guys also hold everyone that works for you to those standards. I mean, you guys in Wednesday meetings will talk to us about getting our shit together in our personal lives in certain ways to help us function better at work. I mean, they really go hand in hand. You can't be a shit show in one area and also excel at something else at the same time. You really have to have all your boxes squared away, and other people talk about that, but I don't think that a lot of people actually live that, and you guys do live it. I mean, you can see it, like if you walk through your personal house, the thing's spotless, your property looks great, all your stuff's really organized, and then people walk through the shop and wonder how it looks so clean, and like it still has personality. I mean, there's heads on the walls and cool stuff everywhere, but it is spotless and really well organized. Right. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Yeah. Not a lot of people actually operate that way. So it's really cool. In addition to learning how to do, business stuff with a safety net and be able to learn from someone like Andrew, learn from someone like you, learn from someone like Brandon. It's really cool to also be pushed in all those ways, because I think especially, I mean, you talk to Melissa about this too, but like some of those ways that you guys have been pushing us have really been bleeding over into our personal lives and really accelerating us outside of work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, our ability to be disciplined and go to the gym and run, and even you know, like you and Andrew and Brandon leading by example in the way that, you know, if anyone doesn't have time to go to the gym, it's like you three, or do whatever, or go make knives on the side. But like Andrew's at SBG every morning, or every Monday and Wednesday morning at 5:30 a.m. rolling, doing jujitsu. Every other day they're not doing that. Andrew and Brandon are at, you know, the gym at 5:45, like lifting. You're still finding time to do, you know, a mile a day or whatever. And then also I'll, you know, go hunt or whatever and do stuff on the weekends just like we are. And I think it's really cool for especially the younger guys in this shop or gals to be able to look at that and see that, hey, like these guys are crazy busy. Probably owning a business is more stressful than even I thought it was or I want it to be. But you can achieve this and still do all this stuff that I maybe am struggling to find time to do in my own personal life. But going off on a tangent there, but I really do feel like, to summarize that, being part of a community of people that push each other and hold each other to high standards, and try to bring other people up instead of tearing them down to try to get ahead or to use them to try to get ahead is very, very valuable and not something that's easy to find.
Well, you're now a part of that because when I say a part of that, I mean you're now that example. You know, even as a young guy, you can still be an example for people older than you. You know, you don't have the stresses of life of having kids and spouse and, you know, some of the outside stresses that maybe some of the people you manage have. But you are that example. You're leading, like you say, through going to the gym. I mean, hell, we're podcasting here at 7:30 in the morning, and you've already been on a hike this morning up a mountain. So that kind of stuff permeates and it seeps and leaks down through, and people soak that stuff up. The ones that don't soak it up are the ones that won't last.
Right.
Like, and it's somewhat of a self-selection process. People will take themselves out of it that can't hang. We've had a few people do that. And we'll have some more, I'm sure, but ultimately down the road, you know, we want more people like you. You know, we want people who take pride in not just the company, but take pride in every part of their life, you know, and live it to the fullest and go experience cool shit, go do cool shit. I always say, like, you know, the people's resumes don't really dazzle me. It's, if I pull up an Instagram page of someone and I see on a Saturday morning they've hiked to the top of a mountain, or on Sunday they've gone, you know, high lake backcountry fishing or skiing or something, versus like all I did all day Sunday was play video games and sit around.
Right. And I think that goes back to encouraging your kids to do that really early on in life, like to have hobbies and to have things that they're driven to do, because that will extend farther into their life. And like you just said, like literally just then, like my parents buying me a little anvil made out of a railroad, chunk of railroad, and a little 2-pound ball peen hammer, and letting me hammer away at steel, or letting me almost light our field on fire, just sitting there doing hand drill fires all day, or going camping or whatever.
But you're doing something.
I'm doing something. And, I think that that's a very common trait of a lot of people that work here and a lot of people that we're drawn to. But that'll extend, well past childhood and into your life. I mean, clearly as it has for you, right?
Right.
I mean, that's that hobby turned into something a lot bigger. But
in a rare case like mine, it sticks for a career. But you don't, I always tell people, like, if your kid wants to get into making some knives, let him make some knives, and he'll probably quit. He'll probably go do something else. Doesn't matter.
No,
it doesn't matter. He'll go from making knives to maybe he wants to make a bow, and maybe later he wants to make canoe paddles. It doesn't matter, or he wants to start fishing and tie his own flies.
But later down the line, someone like you or Andrew in the position of trying to hire people that are self-driven and are passionate about life and all those good things that we look for. That whether they have Instagram or not, you might even ask them what they like to do.
Yep.
And that may just help them more than they know.
100%. And it also it's to me it's the kind of mind that you develop. Like it's a curious mind. Like, well, I'll try that. I did that, got decent at it, or I didn't like it, or whatever. And okay, well, I'll try that, or I'll try this. It's that not being afraid to try things, because also in the shop, like we might come downstairs with a whole new idea about how we're going to do something. Yeah, let's try it. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be married to it. We're going to have to take feedback, and we're going to figure out if it's a smart thing to do. But work ethic, going and doing hard things when you don't want to do it. I learned that from my parents for sure. But no, it's been really cool watching you mature and grow, and now you're kind of maturing into that leadership role, starting to learn how to do that. And then I love getting you, and I love getting you, not just you, but a lot of our team members out to shows, because I'm very proud of the culture and the kind of people we have. It'd be easy to just contract shows out, and it would quite frankly be easier for us to just have everybody in the shop making knives and then have some other people worry about shows and not disrupt our workflow and our process. And because we're obviously trying to get knives done, like last week the last couple of weeks with a couple of the shows we've done, like that slows us down to get knives up for sale on our website. No doubt slows us down. But to me, I think that it also in another way is so valuable because it allows our customers to meet people like you, Melissa, Dylan, Travis, doesn't matter who it is, Brett, they pair us, whether they see that we have young men and women in our company, they see the kind of people you are, that you can all talk to people, and they go home and they're like, that Montana Knife Company crew, like, it's not just Josh, it's not just Brandon, it's that whole crew all the way through, and we get the compliments that whole crew all the way through are amazing people. And in turn, that's also going to make them want to buy more knives. So it's also good for the company in the long run. But it's not just about that, because I also want employees to see the impact that you guys are having on other people. What we are building, not just me and Brandon, but all of us together are building, is something that's very inspiring for people who are working a day job and they're thinking about trying to start a little business of some kind, and they see, or they're raising kids and they see, hey, my kid's all into these outdoor things, and maybe he's a little nerdy and he likes to do some outdoor stuff. He's not an athlete, but like, no, there's paths that he can take, and he can live that outdoor space, outdoor world, and make a career of it. So I think what you're doing is also very inspiring for other young kids. I think it's good for parents to see that, hey, if your kid's not super into football, like, that's all right. If that kid wants to sit out and rub sticks together in the yard, let him. Buy him a tent.
Yeah.
Support those kids, even if he is, I'm sure at times that there might have been some people that looked at you as a little bit of the weirdo. I know me, being the knife maker and not going to some parties and not doing some of the stuff that my friends were doing, I was the weirdo. Like, you're making your stupid knives again. Like, whatever. We're all going to do this. Like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So it also makes a strong individual where you are confident in, like, yeah, I'm going to take my backpack up in the woods and rub sticks together.
Yep.
And people think that's weird, but it makes for a confident individual in yourself. And down the road, I think a really well-rounded and cool individual that now you're accomplishing great things.
Right. And it's funny because as a younger person, it starts out as you being the weirdo. And later on, if you stick with that, quickly I've come to realize that all of a sudden,
you're the cool kid.
now it's cool
Yeah.
to do stuff that nobody else does.
Right.
And I'm sure you found that too.
Yeah.
Especially through, I mean, how much do you get to do that has nothing to do with knife making?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because other people think it's cool.
All kinds of cool
All kinds of cool stuff, all kinds of cool people.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth it to lean into those things.
Well, do you have any anything to close or anything? Do you have any hunts planned for this year? Or?
I'm kicking around a couple ideas. I'm not really committed to anything yet, other than spring bear in Montana. Just trying to make the most of weekends and free time and get out. I mean, we have so much opportunity here.
That's
it's
one
amazing.
thing I was going to say about you. The way you hunt, when people see your pictures you put up or the stuff you're doing, the other thing that people need to remember, you guys are hunting public land. It's not easy in Montana. I mean, there's more hunters than ever in Montana, more out-of-staters than ever coming in here. There's more information on the backcountry. Apps like Onyx Maps have made it easier to find trails and e-scout, and certain things have made it easier. The equipment and the gear has made it easier to go in farther and stay longer. But the really cool thing, I mean, I would always give you tons of shit when you were struggling to kill an elk for a couple of years there, but ultimately I had a lot of respect because you're doing it the hard way. Like, it isn't easy to kill a public land elk in Montana. So when you do it, like you did last year, like that whitetail buck that you shot, and when you go in and you're finally successful, it's from a lot of hard work, and it's definitely not a fluke. It's tough,
and it's not that for a long time there I wasn't seeing them. For the last few years I can remember, I've seen an elk every single time I've gone out hunting.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had plenty of bulls shot out from underneath me by a guy sitting in the bushes next to me that I didn't know was there. But it is cool that we live in a place where it is tough and it is anybody's game. But if you put in the work and decide to go out in the shitty rain, that
when you learn, you're getting better every single year.
You're getting better, and at the end of the day, if you really like being out there, it doesn't matter if you get anything or not.
Yeah.
But I'll probably do a lot of spring bear hunting in the fall, or in the spring. Mid-May probably this year is going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
And then
and next year you'll go on that sheep hunt?
Yeah, that'll be November 2025.
Awesome.
And there's still some details of that need to get worked out, but that'll be pretty cool. I mean, that's not something that I ever would have chosen to do on my own, but then again, there's been lots of opportunities like that where, they sort of fall into your lap and they end up being really cool.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I actually really do just really love hunting our over-the-counter public land tags.
Yeah.
Just because, they're places that I have connection to and that I like going to and that I enjoy the process of learning and going back to, trying to grind it out in. So
awesome, man. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you jumping on here this morning.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And
where can people, if you want people, I don't know if you want to give out your Instagram, if people follow you.
I will. It's private. I've had a lot of weirdos, on my Instagram in the past, but, it's Tristan Richter 02, on Instagram. And, if you look like not a psychopath, I'll probably accept your follow if you want to follow along with me. But I don't post a whole lot, but I try to put some cool stuff on there every once in a while.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right.
All right.